meeting of the park board. Cassie, is there anyone in the chat room?
No, there is not.
So there's no need to do the script. Cassie, can we do a roll call, please?
Yes. Okay. We have a few people coming in. Dale Harris.
Here.
Wendy. See you. John O'Connor.
Here. I'm here.
Sonia. Danny. Margie.
Here.
Dave.
Here.
All right. The quorum.
Thank you, Kathy, very much.
I am here. It's Wendy. I couldn't get my mute button off. Sorry.
I saw you waving.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Be great to get a motion, please.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Any discussion? Good job with the minutes, Cassie. All those in favor say aye.
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 Margie,
Aye.
Dave.
Aye.
Motion, anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
I think Sonia just joined the meeting. Sonia, is that you calling in?
I did join the meeting and finally got myself unmuted, and I say aye also.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Any staff announcements? Don, any announcements?
Not at this time.
Cool. Any comments from the public or guests?
No.
Good morning, David. So we could move right along. We go right to the action items. First action item is a request from Ryan Applegate. Ryan, you're up.
Hi, all. Trying to work so that you can see me, but can you hear me okay?
We can barely hear you.
Okay, I will try to get a little closer.
Thank
Is
you,
that
Ryan.
a little better?
Much
you can
better.
hear me okay? Okay. Well, I think today,
Can you turn your video on?
in order to share, I'm trying to connect video now. Can you see me?
Yes.
Kind of a dual thing going.
Go ahead, Ryan. We can see and hear
Okay. Awesome. I was going to share my screen and review budget and CIP. Let me just make sure.
you. Actually,
Hold
Ryan,
on.
on the
Yeah.
enterprise item, budget,
Oh,
CIP is
I
later.
apologize. Yeah, I apologize. Thank you. There's an action item. I will not share my screen. Sorry for that. Yeah, this is an enterprise request to use some of the monies that is received from the purchase of city cards to keep our software up to date to receive payments. This specific request is to add a computer that is capable of servicing credit card payments for our recreation program specifically. In the past, this is the uses that we've used these funds for, and the request this year, we have 3,500 identified in needs. I upped it a little bit because I believe we're going through also making sure we have all of our key fobs and items related to customer service, particularly with RecTrack. And so that's the request in front of you today, and happy to field any questions. Yeah, John.
Hey, Ryan, can you remind
What's the
me? It could just be that I'm getting old and forgetful, but I thought we just did this less than a year ago, added another mobile station so that it would make it easier for folks. Is that,
Yep.
was that more than a year ago, or is this just increased demand, or what's going on?
Year and a half, and yes, it is related to increased demand. We added Parks Front Desk Station 2, and so there we did add a station next to where Paula typically sits in Parks Front Desk, and this station would be added to the program staff. So in Meg's office, we do a lot of, and Meg's office station needs to be upgraded as well. And we do, the program staff does a lot of communicating directly with program participants, and currently do not have the ability to finish a transaction while they're on the phone with them. And we feel that the program staff is trained appropriately and would be able to provide service to customer better could they take payment at time of talking to them instead of forwarding or transferring them to a station that could take payment. So yes, we did add a station. There is more demand still, and this would help us to meet that demand and service the customer better.
Thanks, Ryan.
Hey, Ryan, remind us what a city card is.
City card is eligible to city residents for purchase for $1 in order for them to receive discounted rates on programs. All full rates are open to everyone, and if you live in the city, you're eligible to receive a city card, and that gives you a reduction, typically around 10% for programming.
The
Thank you.
intention of the program was to recognize that city residents pay increased property taxes over non-city residents, and that about 35% of all city services are consumed by non-city residents. So we felt that it was appropriate to give city residents a minor break on parks and recreation programs. And
Got it. Thank you. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi.
Any other questions for Ryan or Donna? Hearing none, it'd be great to get a motion on the floor.
This is Wendy, and I make a motion to approve expending up to $5,000 to provide a new mobile pay station, an additional workstation, and various upgrades to existing workstations.
Thank you, Wendy. Is there a second? Great to get a second from somebody, please.
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you, John. Any more discussion? Any comments from the members of the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do a-
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. The motion passes. Next item is Shirley. Welcome, Shirley.
Hello, everyone. So my request is for enterprise money from the Tennis Enterprise Fund to fill the cracks at the Fort tennis courts. As you all know, probably, the tennis courts are coming to the end of their lifespan. We've got some serious problems at Playfair, and we're working with the other user groups to mitigate and or rebuild those courts. The Fort courts, however, were resurfaced recently under the bond at Fort Missoula to build those out. And they're in fairly good shape. They still have structural problems underneath because the resurfacing didn't address the structural problems that are underlying. But we believe that we can get, 3, 5, 8 years out of the if we just keep up on the cracks. So the request is for $7,760 from the Tennis Enterprise Fund to contract with Koch Tennis to come in and fill the cracks at the fort. Currently, there is 128,529 in the enterprise fund in total for the tennis. 51,000 of that is dedicated to the fort.
Thank you, Shirley. Any questions for Shirley?
Yeah, Shirley, how old are these tennis courts at Fort Missoula?
Both Playfair and the fort were rebuilt in 2000, I believe.
So these aren't the new ones at Fort Missoula.
No, the new ones are the pickleball courts. So what we did is we resurfaced the tennis courts. So it's kind of, we just put a new surface on courts. So they look good. The cracks are still there. There's still structural problems that were existing before, but they're definitely worth patching to mitigate the cracks.
So when all the building and everything went on at Fort Missoula, these were not included in that?
They were not.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
John?
Thanks, Shirley.
Hi, Shirley. 2 questions. Do we already have any kind of idea? I know prices change, but idea for what the future replacement costs will be for those courts there? That's my first question. Second question is, are there same cracks and things like that to address at Playfair that we'll need to think about for future enterprise fund expenditure?
So the Playfair courts need to be replaced. We just received a couple of quotes from Jackson Contracting that gave us some estimates. We'd really like to mitigate the problem with post-tension concrete. But let me share my screen with you here, and I can show you. Yes, this one, share. Okay, so can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. So looking at the Playfair courts, if we were to replace all 12 courts with asphalt and with no lights, we're looking at $1,200,000. To replace those courts with post-tension concrete, around $2,400,000. So
How many courts is that?
12.
Thank you. Any other questions for Shirley?
Shirley, will you scroll down just a little bit so we can see that total when you add the alternatives?
Yep. There you go.
That's a big fish to fry.
It is a big fish to fry.
I would never have guessed that it was that much. Wow.
Well, the price definitely jumped in the last 20 years. That's for sure. So
Back to the enterprise request. Any more questions for Shirley?
Sorry, Shirley, I did have one more question. What's the current balance in that fund?
So the total balance is 128,529, and of that 51,412 is dedicated to the fort.
Okay. So you feel this expenditure won't jeopardize anything coming down the pipe anytime soon until we figure out how to replace these?
I think it's a good expenditure to mitigate the cracks right now at the fort, make them good playable surface, and so we can figure out what to do with Playfair.
Thank you. Sorry
Have
for all
you
the questions.
Any
No,
other
no
questions?
worries.
I have a question, Shirley. When you said their structural issues weren't addressed, if the structural issues are addressed, what is the lifespan of a tennis court with the proper base versus a tennis court without a proper base?
Well, it's not that they didn't start with a proper base. The structural problems happen over time. The life of an asphalt tennis court is around 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
give or take, depending on weather conditions. And that's about where we're at with the tennis courts. So
Okay.
there are some structural issues under the fort, but I think we can limp along with it if we can just maintain that surface.
Okay, thank you.
Shirley, this is Dale. Have you worked with this contractor before?
Jackson Contracting built the fort, and they are, oh, you mean Koch?
Yes.
Yeah, Koch is great. He's very conscientious, and he does a good job when he comes and does work for us.
And they specialize in this.
That's their specialty.
Okay. Any other questions for Shirley? Are we ready for a motion? Be great to get a motion on the floor, please.
This is Wendy again. And I make a motion to approve the expenditure of up to $7,760 from the Tennis Enterprise Fund in order to fill the cracks in the Fort Missoula tennis courts.
This is Sonia.
Thank you, Wendy. Is there a second? Thank you, Sonia. Any other questions? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye, or do a thumbs up.
Aye.
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 Opposed, motion passes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shirley. I think the next, we're done with our action item. The next item is Ryan and the budget CIP update. So,
Okay.
As Brian is getting ready to share his screen, just preliminary information is at this point, the work on a citywide level has been reviewing and revisiting the strategic goals, establishing priorities among those strategic goals. We did recently receive a community survey response. Good news is Parks and Recreation scores the highest satisfaction among all departments and all services in the city. The items that people want to fund more and or support, if there is additional funding, or the priorities they have for tax dollars, are to address housing, mental health services, and fire. And then I think it's parks. So good news on satisfaction, not bad being around fourth in desire to fund, given that the satisfaction is as high as it is. Interesting to me was the significant increase in the community's emphasis on mental health services since the last survey about 3 years ago. That survey just came out Friday night. We can put that on our agenda for next month to go into more detail, or as it actually becomes available through City Council, we can share that with you.
thank you, Donna.
Brian, take it from there.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit
Okay.
about ARPA and CARES as you go through to explain what you've been thinking about and how we're going through this budget process.
Sure. So I believe I sent out on Friday, and it was a lot of information. It was, I think, 4 different PDFs. And then started continuing to work on kind of a summary page, and what you're looking at in front of you is our annual budget summary page. And we do have, I believe, the PDFs if we want to look into anything into more detail. As Donna mentioned, and so I guess I will say that this is for our annual budget. and our new requests separated kind of by our functional work teams. And that would add to our in some level, some tax appropriation. Some of the requests are funded by fee for service. And actually this year, some of our requests could be funded by a reduction of intermittent salaries in lieu of adding a classified staff. So there's kind of a number of things moving on here. Where we're at now is have all of our requests gathered from our different divisions and beginning our ranking process to fit kind of what we believe is we always carry forward what we think we need to provide the level of service that is either mandated or expected level of service, and then it always fights up against what is available in terms of funding, and that's where the prioritization comes in. So I'll just go through our annual budget enhancements. I will note also that our payroll is increasing from fiscal year 21 to 22 due to both collective bargaining agreement contracts, expected cost of living raises, and then some expected insurance raises as well. So that is also a factor that we'll be considering in terms of how to appropriate the funds and how to prioritize. So the contractual and utility increases, this summarizes the expected increases in fuel and water and natural gas and electricity. In here also is the long-term lease of the land on North Side Annex from the Catholic Diocese, and that is mostly what that is. And then this second one is the Fort Missoula Regional Park City Side contribution increase. The city and county jointly fund this park. This increase accounts for increases in payroll associated with the operations and maintenance fund and a slight increase for inflation in the supplies and the purchase services.
Hey, Ryan.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt. This is John. On that item number 1, the north side property with the Catholic Diocese, will you just remind us, that's the Little League baseball fields, correct?
This is the North Side Annex. There is a ball diamond there, but near the North Side Community Gardens.
Okay, yeah, right.
Does that make sense? And yeah, this is a long-term lease of those lands, I think. So and that accounts for that. I believe it's around $3,000 a year. So it's not a huge amount of money, but we did put it in here. In terms of ecosystems services, the ecosystem services team has requested a new light utility truck, and to request that funding from the Conservation Land and Stewardship Fund. These would be debt services. The total cost of the truck is around $37,000. There are some estimations for vehicle maintenance and fuel in there as well, but that's just to service our growing employment pool there, our labor staff. There's also, if you may recall, last year City Council approved a water truck, and we have that truck on order. This is to help with the watering during the formative years of trees on boulevards mostly. We did not get a position to drive that water truck and do other conservation lands management and urban forestry kind of related. So this request is for a maintenance worker to during the heavy watering seasons, go around and do that, and then also do a lot of related work with conservation lands and urban forestry. Urban forestry is also, and I believe finance just directed me to put this into a CIP. This is to retrofit a chassis of a truck that is existing to put a grapple boom on it to allow us to do more with the trees that we're removing and replacing, and get us into our kind of reusing the trees in the form of chipping and getting it to the compost plant, and then spreading those chips around. This grapple boom will allow for that type of conservation of materials and composting and recycling of those materials to put back into the urban forestry program. That is the UF grapple boom truck. Those are the three asks kind of in the conservation lands management and the urban forestry realm this year. Develop Parks has a number of requests, and these are requests mostly that are forwarding from our fiscal year 21 ask. If you would, or if you remember, a lot of the 21 budget requests were funded one time through Park District fund balance. And so we need to ask for them again in order to get them into a ongoing funded category. This has to do with the Developed Parks portion of the annexation from the end of calendar year 20, which gave us Redfern Park to manage. We did get some funding for the urban forestry related to that annexation in fiscal year 20. That was ongoing. We asked for it in fiscal year 21, got it funded one time, and this is the remaining ask for the level of service maintenance at Redfern Park. This next one, the Montana NDT projects, mostly relates to the new undercrossing and improvements at Russell Street, also at Van Buren and Orange roundabouts. And this is the remaining funding. Again, we had some funded in fiscal year 20, and this is the funding request for fiscal year 22. This year, we did also put in a Ventrac mower in this request. This will, as a smaller riding lawnmower that will allow us to get into small areas and kind of do the work that usually right now we have to take two mowers to do. So this is a good efficiency upgrade for the Developed Parks and Trails unit, and so that is that request. And we've asked for that for a number of years as well, that meaning the Ventrac mower. This next one, unfunded Developed Parks at MRL and Jeffrey. This is the, we did in previous years, fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20, got the supplies and the purchase services related to these budget requests. The increased staffing in the form of park attendance has not been funded yet, and so this is carrying forward that request to get to our fully operational for the level of service we need to provide at MRL and Jeffrey Park. Unfunded trails is another carry forward from a multiple amount of trail upgrades that have happened over the last 7 years now. And based on our management impact statements, again, we've been getting some of the supplies and the purchase services, but we're short on staff-wise. So this request continues to ask for intermittent staff to help meet the level of services out there. Our small PAM increase, this is to help meet our deferred maintenance needs in our developed parks Our current budget for the whole system for deferred maintenance and what we call small PAM is $100,000. We've been asking for increases for the last 4 or 5 years to this. I think since I've been here, we've gotten about 30,000 increase, and this allows us to do cyclical maintenance items, including irrigation, well replacements, changing out pumps to VFD drives, ensuring that we have a budget for replacing playground parts as they go through their cycle of use. Also for cracks in our commuter trails. We have a number of projects that are on our list for this year and identified 90,000. And this just helps us provide, a good level of park services for folks and make the most of the lifespan of the assets that we have. And our park asset management plan would like to see this in 2014 dollars, an annual cyclical maintenance reinvestment of about $250,000. Like I said, we're at $100,000 per year. This would get us up to $190,000 per year for those cyclical maintenance items system-wide. Also, our turf management is an ask to continue developing our and meeting the needs that have been adopted by our turf management plan to both promote healthy turf grass and reduce the chemical dependency in our turf playing. This also has some equipment associated with it to help meet those minimum needs of our athletic turf grass. So that's our developed parks asks for fiscal year 22. And again, this is kind of the whole picture. We haven't started prioritizing, although that is our next step, and are open to feedback. That kind of covers our operations division asks. Before we go into recreation, Donna, would you like to add anything, or if there's any questions that we can talk about right now? I'd be happy to.
I have questions.
Yes.
So Ryan, explain what the column that says PD recommendation. What is that column?
Currently, right now, it basically is the full amount because we haven't begun our prioritization. And as we go through this and get closer to a prioritizing and any knowledge we see for what is the ability to, where the upper limit of funding may be, or what we're thinking is going to be funded, we will get really, really specific with this column, and we may say, we're going for our supplies and purchase services, and this recommendation column will go down.
It's the park district though, Dale. It's the funding source. That's the the park district assessment.
Got it. And so, and why did admin ask that the boom truck be put in CIP?
Why did the grapple boom truck? Was that the question?
Yes.
Because of the price of it. Lower vehicles, I think it's typically below 75 and 100, and this has been changing with finance a little bit, are on budget, are asked to be put in budget requests. The higher value equipment is sometimes asked to be put in the capital improvement plan. And so I had asked finance that direction and just recently received word that we should move it to the capital improvement plan.
Great. So anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay. So in recreation, I've got aquatics first. we have identified for about 2 or 3 years the kind of, with the growing demand of recreation program services, especially on our customer service units, the park district, we've kind of identified what has been coded traditionally to aquatics that doesn't necessarily meet the function of aquatics, but is more broad customer service, recreation program customer service, and other. And we've increased the contribution to Park District to help cover that in recent years. This aquatics operating in cyclical is to get to what we have identified. I think it's about 10,000 more in kind of that intermittent operating salaries that are coded to the aquatics fund but service the Park District. So part of this request is to increase the annual operating contribution from Park District to the aquatics fund. The other part of it is to grow a cyclical maintenance fund for our aquatics facilities. And that is currently at 40,000 a year is what we're trying to target. We'd like to grow that to 50,000. And this is trying to get to a best practice of allowing ourselves to reinvest and invest in our aquatics facilities so that we can maximize the life of the asset and make sure that the splash and currents remain premier facilities. So this ask is to increase Park District contribution to the aquatics fund. It would go from 250,000 to 278,000 if this ask was funded. The other ask here is aquatics maintenance staff. Currently, our aquatics facilities have 3 full-time staff, the aquatics manager, Eric Seagrave, and 2 aquatics coordinators, Hannah Shepard and Tori Learn. And then we've relied on the maintenance to be heavily taken care of by the aquatics manager position while the 2 coordinators do the programming there. That takes a lot of time, especially as the aquatics age. And not only are we taking care of currents and splash, we're also taking care of 4 splash decks across the system. This ask is to add a 10-month employee that focuses on the keeping the aquatics maintenance up to speed in conjunction with the aquatics manager, and not relying on intermittent staff for that job, because the intermittent staff require training every year. There's a lot more turnover, and our hope is that by creating a classified staff, we would be able to develop that position and just get year after year consistent service, because it's a pretty complex, basically 3 complex systems that are being asked to run. So that's this request. A recreation program staffing. This is for 2 full-time program assistants to work in our recreation programming. Our recreation programs are growing, and we need to grow with them. We have high demand in our recreation programming. For every 1 spot that is filled in a camp, there's about 2.5 people waiting on a wait list right now. And this also will help us to get get people at each level of our organization doing the jobs that need to be done, both looking forward in terms of growing new programs and planning for the annual programs, and then the boots on the ground to actually run the programs. So this is also growing our staffing capacity to support us into the future. So this ask is specifically for 2 full-time program assistants to work on our recreation program team. The next kind of 3 asks here are are related to fees for our programs in a lot of ways, and trying to ensure that our programs are open and available to as many of our community members as possible. The first is the after-school program. We were able to offer after-school programming, and earlier during the pandemic, we're able to offer out-of-school programming at highly reduced rates due to some federal grants. And even when the grant went away, we were able to offer a sliding fee scale for our after-school programming. And that opened up the after-school program to a lot more individuals to participate. And we do a self-reported income to get to a reduction of fees. And it gave us some good information to look at of, you know, how can we help individuals continue in our programming. And right now, about almost 70% of the participants in our after-school program are at or below the median income in Missoula, which is about $80,000 for a family of 4. And of that, about 60% are in the low income bracket, as identified by HUD Metrics for calendar year 2020. And so we kind of use those numbers of participation and forecasted out with a little bit of room for growth. If we continue to offer our current sliding fee scale, what would we need to do? What kind of contribution would need to happen to make that a viable option? And that's just specifically for our after-school program. We service, I believe, 5 area schools, and the write-up is in the request. But that would be about $50,000 a park district contribution. Also exploring, as Donna mentioned, as we go through the budget process, the ability and the potential to have some of the American Rescue Plan dollars focus on this for the next 2 or 3 years. It's a little bit tricky because we want to be careful to not fund ongoing requests with money that isn't of an ongoing nature. And there is a high need to do this. So it would have to be kind of a multi, prong approach that where potentially ARPA funds could help in the short term while we build a long-term solution for it. So I just wanted those are some thoughts as we go through the budget process. But that's specifically for our after-school programs during the school year. The Lowell Community Center, as we've ran that program, it was funded and it is an ongoing funding at about $90,000 per year. As we ran it through the year, the specific needs of the school and what we were asked to do was somewhat from the increased hours of service, but also from the nature of the participation. We've needed more one-on-one and lower staff ratios. And so this request is to continue to build that Lowell Neighborhood Community Center with the staffing levels appropriate for what we're being asked to do. There is also some facility upgrades as we move into operating the Lowell Neighborhood Community Center on an ongoing basis when school hours are not there. Or when school is not in session. So that's the Lowell Neighborhood Community Center ask. The facility management ask here for base is to continue operating the old public library. We took over operation and programming of that in the fall of last year, and there is an opportunity to continue operating that. It is in for programming, and we're starting to program active older adult programs in there. This also is in conjunction with the loss of our City Life facility, which we will no longer be managing. So this gives us the opportunity to program a large facility. You know, we do have the programs and we have the demand to meet those. And this is to help. And what we're doing is here is a lot of the programs that are offered here are introductory and more community-based programs. They're for our after-school care in the winter. They're for active aging adults. And so they're programs that we don't necessarily want to offer at fee plus or make a profit off of. And so this ask is to help cover the fixed costs associated with a facility of that nature. There will be some fees for those programs, but they won't be able to cover all of the indirect costs related to running it. So this is the heat of this facility. This is in the winter time, making sure we can plow the sidewalks. This is that type of ask for that facility. Our summer scholarship ask. So I've separated intentionally kind of our after-school programming and during programming from our summer. We did that through the pandemic to kind of preserve our share of the fund scholarship that we've offered for many years. And the ask here is many times out of the years, I'm sorry, let me kind of restart that. Our programming in the summer and actually through the fiscal year, what we've tried to do is all of our youth programming, all of our adult programming, all of our sports, our budget for that, the revenue and expenses are in a defined area within our budget. So we bring in money and we expend money. Currently, our cost recovery for those programs are budgeted at about 75%. So we have budget authority to expend more than revenue we expect to bring in. And that difference is covered in the park district. Typically, our recreation programming operates between an 85 and 90% cost recovery. So we perform better than budget on an annual basis. This request, and that happened in 20, it happened in 21. This request this year is to recognize that and say, we offer some programs at a higher rate and we perform better than we're budgeted for. We want to take some of that excess of difference from budget to actual and reinvest it in our scholarship fund, and we want to review that on an annual basis. Right now, with the estimate of our Park District fund balance, number one, at the end of the year at about $1.3 million, some of that is attributed to the growth of our recreation program and how much demand there is out there. So this ask is to take some of that, move it into our scholarship fund to allow our scholarships to grow. Currently, our scholarship program is capped at about $270 per family. That allows a person to, a participant to join in 1 week of camp on average. They can do aquatics passes as well with that. We'd like to look at growing that, increasing that twofold, so it's 2 weeks of camp, and see where the fund balance gets to there. And we'd like the opportunity to review every year to see how our recreation programs did actual to budget, and to make a recommendation during the budget process as to if there is any fund balance specific to our recreation program that could go into the scholarship program. And so that is that ask. You know, there's a number of things. that excess, if you will, of budget to actual performance could be used from. Sometimes it might be better to reinvest it into quick gear and equipment, and maybe that's the form that it takes in some years. But this is an ask to really have the department look at budget to actual performance and make recommendations if there is any excess. And maybe some years we perform less than what we're budgeted for, and we need to talk about it that. So I'll leave it there.
Hey, Ryan.
Happy to talk. Yes, please.
I do have a question about that. When you say performance to budget, are you implying something other than realized savings? So if an item was budgeted a certain amount, say $100, and you only spent 80, are you saying performance to budget is that $20, or is there some other measure that you want to use for that performance to budget?
I'm basically saying that I think the recognition also needs to be there that right now in, say, a program, our budgeted revenue would be $100, but our budgeted expense for that program may be $120. And that's where that 75% cost recovery comes in. And so because our fee for service revenue is less than our expenses, it is already assumed that taxpayer contribution will be in the mix to help there. So I guess I'm saying in general, if we agree as a community that we have the right taxpayer contribution to support our youth programming, and we exceed that expectation, what do we do with the overage? Do we reinvest it in recreation programming? Do we put it in a scholarship fund? Does it go to help the overall park district fund balance? And I'm suggesting that we identify that, we have a conversation every year, and we put forth a budget enhancement that says this is what we want to do with that.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah. And then we're getting down to the end, and thank you so much for listening, and really appreciate feedback from you all. So thank you. This is a request to add a fleet, add a van to our fleet for recreation programming. One of our challenges to ensure that we can meet demand is having enough rooms in our fleet to transport people around. We do our best to use public transit wherever it makes sense, and though we also do need a good fleet for running our programming. So this will help us to transport more of our program participants in the recreation van. Sorry for the misspelling here. The two that we have on kind of admin and planning. One is as we are experiencing growth in our programming and looking towards increasing our equity efforts, our customer service team needs to continue to grow. This is, again, about getting the right people in the right seats on the bus as I'm looking at customer service. Adding an entry-level position, which we have filled in a temporary status right now, will help our current staff take on more roles and will help us to be able to meet the capacity of the needs of our department. This position will focus on the scholarship program, on ensuring working directly with the recreation program to ensure all the admin needs are met. So this is an admin one customer service position to help grow that staff and allow existing members of our team to take on more dedicated roles in the areas they serve. The other ask here is continue work on our GIS development. We've been working with our GIS division and getting a full-time or some of a full-time person over in GIS to be dedicated to parks. I believe they're going to be forwarding that position as an FTE. What this 35,000 non-personnel is to help us engage in a contract to work with GIS to build the framework that's needed to support parks. So that's the last on our admin and planning. I will also note we did have a planner position in there for projects and planning, and that position recently was funded through development fees and will be added to our baseline. And so that's a position to help support our projects and planning team with development. So we did remove that from a new request because through the CPDI, Community Planning and Development and Innovation Department, that was able to be funded through development fees. That's our whole kind of annual budget request. It's a lot of information. It was so much that my camera died on my phone, so I apologize for that. I don't think you'll be able to see me anymore. Questions, comments, please.
So Ryan, could you quickly explain the difference between a budget enhancement and a CIP?
Sure. A budget enhancement is our adding to our usually our park district #1 ongoing annual budget appropriation. It could come in equipment in the form of debt service. So on this column H, if any of these were approved, they would probably add in on a 3 to 5 note. So they would be a fifth of what they are listed here and show up in debt service annually until it's paid off. Our salaries positions would add on to what we call our baseline payroll on an annual basis. And it would be what is, we're committing to funding this annually on an ongoing basis. Those are our annual budget appropriations, where the capital improvement program is usually specific projects of a capital nature, which is defined as the city as 5,000 or more with a lifespan of more than 5 years, I believe. So it's a pretty loose definition. But these are really projects that will take limited time, sometimes multi-year in our case, and have funding sources that could be park district, but oftentimes are partnerships or grants or other things that are funding these specific capital projects. Does that answer the question, Dale?
Thank you. Any questions for Ryan?
I have one, and I have one. This is Sonia. On the library part where you're using that for all the programs, do we have any kind of a commitment from the city of how long we're going to be able to do that?
The last I heard, and Donna may be able to correct me, was around 3 years for the use of the old library.
And we may be 1 year into that.
Maybe 2 more years.
So what happens after 3
Okay.
years? Does the library, is the city going to tear it down, or and then Parks and Rec will need to find other facilities for their activities?
The city will go through a planning process so when the new library was built, there was an exchange of blocks. I don't know if y'all recall that. And so the Payne family ended up owning the old library block and donated that entire block, including the library itself, the old library, to the city of Missoula to be put to a good use, period. That's the parameters. And so the city does it's talked about a fair amount in the downtown master plan. That's a good place to go look regarding what will we do with that block, as well as the 435 Ryman block, which is where City Hall is today. As City Hall and a good portion of the county looks to move to the federal building, which is where the Forest Service was stationed, the regional offices were stationed. The post office would stay there. We would vacate 435 Ryman, and then we have 2 blocks in the downtown that are ripe for development, probably mixed use, retail, commercial, office, residential, parking, and more. There's been discussions about one or both of those facilities, really emphasizing different kinds of equity investments, such as childcare, downtown daycare, if you will, transportation hubs to encourage a heightened level of bike, walk, and bus, because we have a great downtown, and the more people we get down there on foot, the better off it is for our downtown businesses.
Thank you, Donna. Any other questions?
Yeah, so the library, what sorts of programs is that the old library being used for now? Because you mentioned City Life as kind of a temporary replacement, but I'm guessing you're not investing to put like courts and stuff in there. So what programs is the facility being used for?
We have been using it as a youth recreation center, and we would continue to do that. What it does not work for is any kind of ball or sport play that needs to go into the air by more than about 12 to 15 feet. But other than that, they're running scooters and ground games and all kinds of physical activities. We also are looking to programs for mature and aging adults for health and wellness, and potential partners with other nonprofits who are working in the same realm. We think there's room for some dance and cultural activities, health and wellness, and preschool and after school.
Fun. And then the other thing I had, and you kind of touched, I guess I just want to make sure. So the summer scholarships, if for some reason the city doesn't recover that 75% goal, does that still go to summer scholarships, or does that go to other things?
Right now, any revenues or fees for services that exceed what we had projected, and that exceed what we have projected as expenditures, go into, they remain in the park district, and they become part of our fund balance. And what Ryan is suggesting is that we separate this fee piece, and we're looking at multiple ways to increase our scholarship. What we saw during the pandemic was an immense use by families desperately in need. And we don't currently have a funding mechanism or stream that could fund that at the level we believe the community really needs.
Hey, Ryan, go back to the spreadsheet, please. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Danielle. So, Ryan, I have 2 process questions. How did you actually create this list? And where do we go from here?
Yeah, this list was created most by working with each of the superintendents and managers in our functional work teams to provide the needs and the budget enhancements. And then we summarized it into one department ask and identified the funds that would be effective, mostly Park District number 1 and Conservation Stewardship Mill Levy on the spreadsheet. Where we go from here is working to do a departmental prioritization and working to kind of, as the budget process develops, see what is, there has been that do have knowledge that it will be a pretty tight budget year, and we're looking to fund ongoing stuff, particularly, employees in terms of keeping our operations whole as a city. And so I guess I say that because as we see what is available and potentially for Park District, we'll have a better understanding and a better way to prioritize what we need to get funded. So the next step is looking at prioritizations, and then as the process moves along, we get more details on our prioritization list. So I think our next step is to really put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 all the way down to 21 in these programs, and be ready for when we have to do more detailed prioritizations.
Regarding the overall budget, the other pieces of
Thank
the
you.
is the mayor will present strategic goals and the public survey. And I can share some of the slides of the survey if you'd like to see those during the director's report, as well as the community center information. Our goal here now is just to buy as much time as we can to see what might be eligible through ARPA funding. And most of that at this point appears to be going to utilities and housing. And some of that is childcare. Just this last weekend, we sent notice to all of our program participants because families were able to apply for up to $2,000 of support for childcare through the summer. And so we put our folks on notice immediately. So we're kind of holding to wait and see what some of the other funding mechanisms would be. Priorities from a department standpoint continue to be investments in equity. When we have 2.5 registrants for every opening in our youth programs, we feel there's sufficient demand there to really put some focus to it. And the city will continue to look at all priority goals through a lens of both equity and sustainability. And one of our greatest challenges, besides not being able to meet the demand for childcare, has been in some of our areas having sufficient staffing to deliver services because of the current situation of employment in our area.
Thank you, Donna. So Ryan, before you proceed, David and Jeff, how much time do you need in your 2 agenda items?
1 minute.
No, David Salvage.
Sorry.
David should only need, I think they each need about 10 minutes, Dale, and I am fine if we switch to that, and then we can come back to the CIP and the department.
Let's do that.
Okay. So Jeff is here right now. I'm not sure where David ran to, so if you want to start with him, that might
Go
work.
ahead, Jeff.
Sure. So I'm going to give a brief update on the situation with West Broadway Island. A week and a half ago, which I'm looking at the date now, on May 27th, we closed West Broadway Island to the public, as per the mayor's decision, really to account for the drastic increase in unauthorized camping that we were seeing. And in doing that, there was a lot of media coverage, there was a lot of interest from the public. And the plan was kind of changed from a long-term closure to a shorter-term closure, while allowing for environmental remediation. And then also, again, kind of buying us some time to figure out what the management might look like moving forward. And so Donna asked me to put together a work plan for what we're planning to do. And again, this is sort of what's happening while the island is closed, in advance of then reopening to the public sometime mid-June. And that includes a whole host of things. I'm just going to list them off very quickly. We don't need to go through them in specific detail, although I'm happy to answer questions about them. So this includes a full cleanup of all existing campsites and trash on the island. So what we haven't been able to do during prior cleanups is a thorough cleaning. This includes using metal detectors and magnets to pull, let's say, sharps out of the sand that are buried. During prior cleanups, we've been on a pretty short timetable. So again, we've only been able to be down there with police presence. So this goal is to really pull everything out that is there from the unauthorized camping, as well as demolish and restore any existing campsites and fire rings. There have been quite a few established campsites, significant amount of vegetation impacts. And so the goal is to try to restore those as much as possible within a very short time period. There's also going to be quite a bit of natural resource and recreation management. And so, again, long-term impacts have really changed. Long-term camping has really changed the types of use and the locations on the island where people were recreating. They were largely sticking to the established gravel path on the north side rather than exploring off and going down towards the river. So some of the things we're planning to do, again, this is not everything, is continuing to remove invasive trees on the island. This has an added benefit of increasing sight lines. So for monitoring trespass on the island, once it's closed at night, it'll be easier to see closer down towards the river. It should also increase the visibility around the island, and with the goal of making it feel more like a safe space for individuals. Continuing to treat and remove other invasive species. And then the goal is to also delineate a new, yet unimproved natural surface loop trail that's a little bit to the south, sort of on the high ground, to allow people to go down there. We're limited in what we can do due to it being within the 100-year floodplain, but delineating a trail without actually cutting in a new trail and constructing a new trail, we can do that. So the goal is to get people down on the site and provide a loop option in addition to the gravel trail on the north end. And then lastly, we have some infrastructure improvements proposed. These include constructing lockable access gates across both bridges so that the island will be managed much more like a state park, opening at a certain time in the morning and closing at a certain time in the evening. Depending on the time of year, that will change. We are getting bids for those this week. We have a good lead on a contractor that probably has availability to implement something in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And then there will be installation of a lot of additional informational signage, including updated rules and regs, which we are still developing, as well as just trail signage, things like that, to, again, try to encourage positive uses, tell folks where they can go. Folks will be getting, tubing down the river and coming out on this island, how they get out to the street, things like that, to try to encourage positive use and discourage negative use.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff? Sounds very comprehensive.
I was just going to say, one observation is that I was over there this morning and the closure is working. There is nobody on the island. And we have not had any reports of anybody being on the island in the last week and a half. That being said, it is pushing individuals to adjacent areas. There are at least 3 tents on downtown Lyons currently. And so, again, we know David was counting 4 or 5 maybe, that it is pushing individuals elsewhere. But at least the closure that we set up a week and a half ago does seem to be holding.
John, do you have a question?
Are there conversations about permanent closure?
Permanent closure of West Broadway Island?
Yeah.
No, we're looking at a temporary closure and then reopening it from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. day use only. And then as we move into fall, daylight use only. That the purpose of that is manyfold. One, the island is not truly, it's not good for living on. And so we would never authorize or state that anybody should be living in a location where there would be open sewage and potential for flooding and none of the amenities that are make for a safe camping location. And so we do see it as a high value for environmental and education, connectedness with nature, birding, fishing, floating, all those wonderful things that it was intended to be. And then just so you all are aware, the city and the county are partnering on much more robust plans for relocating residents into housing. A tent in the winter in Missoula isn't really what we would call sufficient as housing. And so that plan was unveiled, or at least shared with the public last week by the mayor and the Board of County Commissioners. And things are slowly moving forward on that effort. That effort allowed us to get the island closed right before we had high water, which would have moved folks anyway. And I also wanted to emphasize that our staff and the police officers, exceptionally kind police officers, helped individuals pack, helped them move, gave them money for food. They were exceptionally kind and generous in the efforts of the initial cleanup.
Thank you, Donna. Any more questions for Jeff? Good work, Jeff. David, you're up. Salvage.
David, you're on mute.
Thank you. Greetings. I wanted to provide a public forum opportunity to talk about a grant application that I've submitted on behalf of the department called the Transportation Alternatives Pavement Preservation Program. I prepared about $104,000 grant request to do crack repairs and minor asphalt repairs and then overlay the Northside Greenway Trail. The Northside Greenway is suffering from age, quite a few tree root cracks, and some minor shrinkage cracking. It's time for this to be overlaid and make it a fresh and new riding surface, and would answer any questions. If we were successful, we would work with the state to design and bid this project.
David, where is it again?
The Northside Greenway. Let me pull up does anybody would like to see a map of where that's at?
Quickly, please.
Okay, lots of heads. All right, just a second here. Let me do that.
Hey, Ryan, are you on?
Okay.
I am on.
Go ahead,
Share
David.
my screen.
Can't see it yet, David.
Don't see it.
I'm working on it.
So Ryan, when you're up next, you can do a CIP.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so the Northside Greenway runs parallel to the Montana Rail Link rail yard. It has 6 accesses on it. It's about around just a little under 2,200 linear feet. And it's a major access onto the north side overpass over the rail yard. And each one of these small red lines represents a neighborhood access that's been paved and improved. And it's a little over 20 years old and has had minimal improvements. We've ground out some places where we've got tree root damage up in here and then a fair amount down in here.
And who did you apply to?
This is to the Montana Department of Transportation. They offer a transportation alternatives grant that comes out of the FAST Act, which is the current Transportation Act.
Thank you.
And that's limited to pavement preservation is limited to 200 proposals of 200,000 and less. I talked to the grant administrator and they were evaluating, I think, 7 applications tomorrow.
Any questions for David? Good luck.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yes, good luck, David. Good seeing you.
Good to see you.
Dale, I noticed that we have one guest in the attendees. I don't know if Diane had anything that she wanted to comment on or just listening in, which is totally fine.
Diane? Hearing none, we'll go back to Ryan. Thank you, Donna.
Thanks, Dale. So I also want to bring this up here, I believe, which is with the long list of our CIP projects. And yes.
I was going to say, why don't we go ahead and emphasize the projects that are most likely to go forward, or those that we're most likely to ask for property taxes for? And let's quickly jump over any of those that are funded by some other existing source by just noting that, because it means they're already got an alternate funding source.
Thank you, Donna.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I think I have most of our active projects up top. This spreadsheet shows kind of where they were in our ranking system for last year. Again, we're going to be getting to our draft rankings in fiscal year 22. Project name, total appropriated to date, if we've already received some appropriations. If these can be different, our actual budget can be differentiated between appropriated if we have not kind of received those funds or have pledged those funds. We like to keep an eye on that because just because it's appropriated doesn't mean it's actually in our budget. And then a total expenses to date for active projects and then remaining budget. So kind of gives you a list of where we are. Like Donna said, we'll go through the top ones that are active or have been completed in fiscal year 21. And then kind of move forward with ones that are coming online in fiscal year 22. Bellevue and Syringa Bike Skills Park, substantially complete with phase 1 at Syringa and with Bellevue Bike Park. We are closing this portion of the CIP and breaking it into two for fiscal year 22. One will be the Bellevue Master Plan to take any remaining funds that are associated with Bellevue to put into that CIP, differentiate it from Syringa, and then start a Syringa Phase 2. And again, take any remaining funds that are available for Syringa and put that in Syringa Phase 2 as we move forward with these. The feeling is it's time to have these as separated projects now. Rattlesnake Dam removal, substantially complete with removing the dam and moving on to the management plan aspects of this project. So we are moving this into another CIP and we'll be closing the lower dam CIP and moving it more into the wilderness dams and the management plan aspect of it. We are working with the state and the federal government to close out and receive the final 2 reimbursements from our hazard mitigation program grants, and then the lower intake dam CIP will be substantially complete. We are moving actively on Westside Park, the preschool playground and shelter and bathroom. I think Nathan said that the preschool playground is open to the public now, and that I think shortly, if not already, the spray feature will be back online, and we're actively moving with fundraising and our plans for doing the larger playground restructure capital program in fiscal year 22. And you'll see that here in the draft fiscal year 22 expenses. Northside Bridge, PED bridge replacement. We have engaged HCR and an engineering firm and have some quotes to go to construction. I believe David is still looking at a fall bid for construction in this with actual project work taking place in the early summer months next year through the summer, so through fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. McCormick Park and Community Center. We have engaged a design and consultant team and are going through public process right now to get to a conceptual design. We are hosting an open house on June 17th, which we'll be sure to get you an invite to at Currents with our design team to continue to get public feedback for this project. Waterworks Hill Trailhead improvement. I think we're at about 90% design and should have information on being able to bid this project shortly. So I think current estimates are it's about $730,000, and we're working on the funding package for that currently. Rose Memorial Park, this will be closing out. This was related to impact fees. We did put a portalet shelter in fiscal year 21 with ADA access to it. That was after following up from the new playground out there, and that is the funding that we have available. And so we're back into looking at options to continue the master plan with our partners out there. Hellgate Park, similar. This was finishing off the dog park out there, and there's no plans for expenses in fiscal year 22. And then kind of things that are starting off, Karis Phase 1 just went through a budget amendment for budget appropriation to get to, I think that's a seat wall improvement in conjunction with some work that Stormwater is doing at Karis Park. And that is starting, I think, pretty soon as in conjunction with the Higgins Bridge. We're also engaged a design firm for the Clark Fork riparian restoration and going through a public process. In that, we should see some expenses on the design portion of that coming up at the end of 21 and 22. We're also moving forward with the open space reforestation and should see some expenses on this project for getting trees in the ground in some of our neighborhood parks in Missoula. Conservation lands and trail upgrades. We'll be putting the first item of that out to bid pretty soon and asking City Council to look at a Q4 budget enhancement to have expending authority for some open space bond funds there. This is to begin getting all of the identified trailheads in Missoula some consistent signage and consistent marketing package through there. And so we've been working on that. That are, I think, actively some of the larger projects that are ongoing. You know, let's see, as we go through Milwaukee to Grove Street, Mullen, that doesn't have an active component. We may do some design work in looking at a crossing from the crossing of the Clark Fork River to get over to the Mullen area. And so we continue to forward that CIP. Let's see.
Ryan, just do the active ones, please.
Yeah, I think, you know, that is about our active projects. I think those are the first ones that we move forward with up to this conservation lands trailhead. I don't know, Joe or Donna, do you see me missing ones?
Fort Missoula Ponds, that's going to be an active one for sure because we have money there. We'll be doing stuff out there.
Yeah, these are impact fees to get to the planning process as we develop a master plan for the pond area, the former Knife River site. So, yeah. And then also probably north side, the North Riverside Parks and Trails, downtown riverfront parks. I think some ones of note coming on that may be alive in 22 is downtown Lions Park. Some potential to upgrade the trail with some lighting and activate that park a little bit more. We're looking at that in conjunction with NADA and some other partners, Great Western Engineering, I believe. So that would be a one. Great, thanks, Joe. As Shirley, we talked about, this is a tennis course replacement based on the estimates we were looking at earlier, specifically at Playfair, with kind of funding coming jointly from city, county, and Missoula County Public School partnerships potentials. Just things that we're exploring as that need is becoming more and more. Joe mentioned Bonner looking at doing some ADA upgrades to the band shell, I believe, this year through some partnerships and some private donations. Probably some active work at Rattlesnake Dam Phase 2 to do some kiosk interpretation and continued work on with Missoula Water and Trout Unlimited on the wilderness dams up in the wilderness area. This Higgins Bridge Park restoration will probably be coming online more. I think these should be updated more. There's about $124,000 of dollars that were received from Montana Department of Transportation for leasing East Caris while they did a staging area at the Higgins Bridge, and so we'll be looking at putting that back together as that Higgins Bridge projects lines up.
Hey, Ryan.
Yes, sir.
We got to close it off here. So can you, because I want to make sure we leave time for Donna.
Sounds
so
good.
Where do we go from here?
Yeah, what we'll be doing again is going through a ranking system specifically on our new requests for requested funded in 22. And we'll be looking at, and we have a different spreadsheet that looks at the kind of stress we're putting on Park District, and again look at the funding mechanisms for each project and the need and the other potential that we will be doing. And I have this hidden here is potential to see if any of these parks in either low or moderate income neighborhoods or have high community value may be potential for ARPA funding. So as we go through the CIP project process and working with City Council, we'll be making our recommendations for use of that funding. And then we'll go through a ranking system and go through the budget and CIP process.
And what's the timeline for all this?
The budget typically isn't adopted to the second week in August, but we'll be needing by, I would say, last week in June to have our rankings pretty much complete. And then, the mayor will submit a budget for City Council review, probably at the beginning to mid-July. And then we'll start the budget meetings officially with City Council.
And how can we as a park board help?
In the past, after we've completed our ranking, we've come back and asked for a motion of support in our rankings from Park Board. I wish we were a little bit ahead and could ask for that support for you today, but I don't think we're ready yet. So I could envision us coming back with more information and kind of a ranked system and talk specifically about what we think we can get into the budget and CIPs and ask for your support of that.
Hey, Dale, this is
Yeah.
John. Ryan, I can't remember. Can you just tell me what the difference between the U ranking and the O ranking is?
Yeah, U is update. So it typically has appropriated dollars already, and we're just giving an update. O is an out year. So we weren't asking for funds, particularly in an out year. And then this NS is it's a new project that we potentially are asking for funding for in the current fiscal year. So those are the three rankings. It's an active
Dale,
project that we're giving an update on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And Dale, I could be completely out remembering things the wrong way here and thinking about another ranking that we helped participate in. But at one point in time, we also gave some input with in collaboration with Donna and the team on ranking. Is that are we feeling like that there's not a need for that any longer, or just not time for that?
I can maybe jump in and what I'd like to do, and thank you for bearing with us. As you know, operating budget is probably our single most important piece of work that we do right through the year to make sure we can continue to provide services. We want you well aware of the wide gamut and plethora of things that citizens are requesting. What I would like to do is come back to you on July 13th. We'll put together a little bit more detailed recommendations. At this point, I think Ryan, Cassie, Betsy, and Joe have done an extraordinary job of putting together so many assorted pieces. We have so much to better understand yet on ARPA and where the mayor and the city council are going with how they're going to view property taxes and make priorities. I'm waiting for some guidance from leadership first before I feel comfortable even making recommendations or suggestions to you. And then we'd like to bring it back to you. The timing is a bit scrunched. The mayor does expect to deliver the executive budget on July 7th. I think that's okay. At earliest, I would expect Parks and Recreation would be presenting before City Council on the 14th, 21st, or 28th of July. That means on the 13th, that would give Park Board still some opportunity for input to emphasize what you feel is most important. I do want to note on the CIP items, there are so many capital requests, and Parks and Recreation is a little bit different than some of the departments because so many of our capital requests come from neighborhoods, user groups, sports associations, special interest groups. They do, by and large, show up in the master park plan or the park recreation open space and trails open space plans, or in any one of our management plans. More often than not, other than having sufficient funding to actually realize the project in whole, things take us a long time because we have limited number of employees to actually work with all these citizens groups to implement them. And more often than not, each one of these projects has a capital campaign component that goes with it that we're supporting. So not only do we do public engagement and then park design or project design, even if it's trailhead or signage design, but then we often go into some sort of a capital campaign process and then try and close the gap with some sort of public funding. We do everything we can to get every project as shovel ready as it possibly can be. And that's whether it's a tangible project or even a program, especially at times like this, like when we were in the recession and coming out of it. When we're coming out of a pandemic, you want to be ready for almost anything because you never know how the legislation develops and what becomes priorities and who gets to make what decisions. So we're in the midst of all of those processes. Right now, it feels real messy. So again, I think with Ryan's leadership, we've put together something that's super comprehensive. The last thing I'll say about budget and CIP is simply by identifying them and working with our partners and citizens, we tend to find funding from places we may not have expected it in the past. For example, I have a meeting at 2 o'clock with somebody else who wants to do a donation to a park. And a week and a half ago, received a call from a family who wants to do the ADA improvements at Bonner. And so we try and be as nimble as we can, but all of those little projects do take a lot of time from our employees to administer them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Donna.
Thank you,
Um,
Donna.
As far as ARPA goes for us, where we're concerned, does that funding come from the city, county, or state in our case?
It's a huge mix. There will be a direct federal pass-through directly to the city and the county, managed much like community development block grants through housing and urban development usually go, CDBG HUD.
Okay.
The city will receive, I think it's approximately 14.1 million. Dale Bickle, our CAO, is the point person. Ryan is serving on one of the city's functional work teams to decide how best to spend that money. Right now, the goals are to make investments that are long-term, and housing, housing for everybody, but especially affordable and attainable workforce housing keeps coming to the top of the list, of course, for every imaginable reason. There is also direct federal and particularly federal through state funding. There's all sorts of different ways the funding is coming available, and we're just trying to stay on top of it through Missoula Economic Partnership. We're partnering with MCPS on some childcare stuff. Meg has after school childcare for 2 weeks in the summer, and that's part of a ARPA grant. And so again, just being as nimble as we can possibly be, not only to be available for the funds, but to serve our community where it's most needed at the time it's needed.
Thank you, Donna. Does anyone have any questions for Ryan?
Yeah, I saw open space acquisitions on that list. Is that in addition to open space bond funding, or what is that?
That is earmarking, Danny, acknowledging that we do have open space funds and taking a, if you will, a shot in the dark, that there will be some sort of acquisition in the coming year. And then I don't believe he had OSAC this month, but there are a number of projects that Grant is working on. I expect you'll get updates on that in July.
Thanks.
Any other, David?
Yeah, this is Dave Westfall. Thank you, Dale. This is for Ryan. So Ryan, on your budget enhancement summary, kind of a spreadsheet math question. I noticed that there were line items for budget requests, and then to the right of those, there were 3 other columns for recommendations, a levy fund, and I think it's PDMI fund balance. There were just a few items that almost all but 2 items were carried over from that budget request column into those other areas. But there were 2, and I don't have the spreadsheet, the summary in front of me right now, but there were 2 that didn't carry over. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. I pulled it back up. I think it's the turf management.
Right.
It should carry over. And the UF grapple truck. It should carry over. There's really no reason not to. So that there is no reason. The short answer is it's.
So then, okay, so if we carry those over to recommendation, for example, then those the 3, okay. So now those 3 totals at the bottom should equal the budget request. Is that the right math?
Yeah, they should. And the reason we break it up this way is that at some point, our recommendation will likely not equal our total requests because of funding restraints. And sure. We break it out in these 3 main columns of supplies and purchase services, positions, intermittent staff, and equipment. They're kind of, sometimes we only choose to fund, we need to fund the utilities that are coming online because we got to pay those, right? And we have to make those decisions. As we have it right now, they all equal because we haven't gone through those priority discussions. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does, very clearly. Thank you, appreciate it.
Sure, thank you for the detailed look.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Ryan? Thank you, Ryan, very much for the comprehensive presentation. I think the next is Donna, Director's report.
Really quickly, Dale had asked about the community center, and I wanted to share with you the current Center for Recreation and Creativity. This is at the Engage Missoula site. By end of today, we will be relaunching this site with emails, notifications, and press releases. We have a public opinion survey ready to go. We are preparing for a June 17th in-person open house on the north side of the Currents Aquatic Center with the Missoula Old Public Library as our rain or poor weather site. We have hosted our first working group. We have a second working group meeting on June 29th. And we have recently completed all of our initial stakeholder meetings. So a lot of ways to stay engaged, stay informed. I strongly encourage you to look at this site. I hope that you will fill out the survey. You will be receiving an invitation. And one of the things that would be absolutely wonderful for us is if you would pass that on with a personal note of your own to all the people you know and try and get people involved. What we're trying to do is the community center has been a goal since Celebrate 2000. It was a community-wide facilitated process hosted by a number of businesses. And what can we do in Missoula that's going to make a difference for the next 100 years? There were 3 projects: a Central Park at the fairgrounds, a Missoula Local Endowment Fund, and a community center for Missoula. When we built the Currents Aquatic Center, we always thought that would be the final phase of the community center. But when the old McCormick swimming pool started leaking water the way it did, the aquatics bond quickly became a priority, and we built Splash Montana Currents and 4 spray decks. After that, our next emergency, it really became related to open space, the 06 countywide open space because of growth and development. Then we moved into the Parks and Trails bond because we were just desperate for athletic playing fields and the kinds of facilities you find at Fort Missoula Regional Park. And we were able to replace 10 playgrounds from the Park Asset Management Plan at that time. And of course, we've gone through a recession. And most recently, I think our experiences during the pandemic and with Climate Ready Missoula and with issues related to respect for individuals and how we work together, engage each other, regardless of demographic, has really emphasized the need for indoor space with year-round air quality, year-round lighting, year-round climate control. It doesn't take away or change the way we need all of our parks and open spaces. That is clear from the pandemic. Our open spaces and parks and trails have been used more than they've ever been before, but it has clearly demonstrated also the need for indoor space for dance, music, gathering, congregate meals, exercise and wellness, and just seeing each other in an environment that is incredibly welcoming, warm, sensitive to individuals' needs, and provides the kind of services that we were able to provide through our day-long, 10-hour day, 5-day-a-week children's programs all year. We want to continue that for all ages, all abilities, all demographics.
So you're launching this today?
We'll be launching, we'll be sending out a lot of the information today. We're promoting the June 17th open house, and both the in-person and the virtual open house. At the conclusion of June, we'll gather up all of the information that we have heard, and then the consultants, the architectural team, will have about 2 months to do some design work, and by mid-September, we'll bring an initial design back through public process to say, have we heard what you asked for? Is this what the community has envisioned? We hope for adoption by Park Board and then City Council by end of year of the vision. And then that gets us in a place where we were with Fort Missoula Regional Park, for example, in 2012, after we had completed design and cost estimates on both phases of Fort Missoula Regional Park, similar place with the community center.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Donna on the community center, potential community center?
All right, and then I wanted to show you really briefly, this is a visit ahead of the rest of the community. It's a scientifically valid survey. It was phone call. I don't have all the details, but you can see the changes from 2018 to 2021. Housing is still the most important, but even more important than it was before. Notice homelessness and poverty went up significantly over the past 3 years. Jobs and cost of living stayed about the same. Taxes and spending is down from where it was in 2018. Traffic management and streets just switched spots. Managing for growth, development, climate, and environment are new. I'm going to pick out some slides here just to.
Can you send this to the board?
Yes, I can. Quality of life, still pretty good. People still enjoy their quality of life in Missoula. Comparatively, it has gone down a titch. And I guess that makes sense with what we're seeing. There is some differences by ward, which is kind of interesting. I'm going to skip some slides. This is city services and satisfaction in 2021 compared to importance, compared to support for increased taxes in that area. You'll see that Parks and Recreation satisfaction is highest among all departments in all services, that the importance of it is still extremely high, one of the highest, and then willingness to fund is falling behind fire a little bit, and it's also, there's some other items like willingness to fund affordable housing. So really interesting and important information. This is a level of satisfaction. Again, simply comparing levels of satisfaction from 2018 to 2021. You'll see Parks and Rec again is at the top of that. So something we're proud of, and we think it is a result of the pandemic and our ability to adjust. Level of importance, though, is the most important thing, right? Housing, fire services, planning for growth, streets, and mental health intervention. This was a new question, but note that it's at 4.3%, followed by parks, 4.2. Support for increases, fire, mental health services, affordability, streets, and then parks. Note that childcare is quite high, and that was a new one. And then it follows with some demographic information. This is a draft right now, and there will be a final here in the next couple of days. There's some edits we need to make to the demographics so that they're clear what they mean and what they say. For example, income is by household, not by individual, minor things like that, just for clarity. And I will get you a copy as soon as it's ready. But I wanted to show you.
Thank you. Just a second. Because it's 1:57. Do we need to save any time for any board member final comments? David, did you have a comment?
I had a quick question.
Wendy, go ahead.
It was just on the survey. Who did that survey?
I want to say we did it through the university, but I'm not 100% sure that that's the case. I can find out.
Okay. Yeah, they say that makes a big difference, but those are kind of remarkable results, I think.
Very telling of where we're at and what's changed in the last 3 years, I felt.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks.
Any highlights, Donna, in the last 2 minutes?
Yeah. I think the primary things for us is development continues to be at an incredibly rapid pace. The fact that we will get a planner, we hope that will provide some relief about 6 months down the road, both to us and to the development community waiting for us to look at reviews. We did change cash in lieu regulations. It was a tight vote by City Council. We recently received a cash in lieu valuation where the value of the parkland, so this is cash in lieu of parkland, in a particular development increased by 1%, while the zoning went from 1 dwelling unit per acre to 40 dwelling units per acre. This is the reason that we want appraisals to be done in a more transparent way, and that the city hires the appraiser and confirms what the parameters are, rather than each developer doing that process on their own. Other than that, every member of our team, I think, is going 100 miles an hour, trying to get everything open. We've had some challenges in developed parks, mowers down. We are very short employees in developed parks. And I think Lincoln has done an outstanding job keeping everything together and on the table, but we are probably 2 to 3 weeks behind typical weed work. I'll just put it that way, because we're just right now super focused on mowing. Turf working group meetings are going better. I think we're coming to some solutions. We've been meeting with the tennis community on tennis courts. And then we still have not heard on our Land and Water Conservation Fund grant for West Side Park. I think Jeff has been doing an outstanding job with some of the challenges we've had around West Broadway Island. And we did lose Spencer McCorkle. Spencer had to leave for important personal and family reasons. He was doing a wonderful job of managing Fort Missoula and major events for us. And so we're short in that area, and we were already short some staff in the recreation side. So it's really been about transitioning out of a pandemic where everybody was going. We never closed. We kept going 100 miles an hour during that. And now it's put the pedal down even more to come out of the pandemic and get everything reopened and back to normal, while everything is not exactly normal and we're really short employees.
Thank you, Donna. Any other questions for Donna? Ryan, if you're still on the line, thank you very much for your comprehensive presentation. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Dale, I have one final comment before we make the motion to adjourn, please.
Go for it.
In thinking about all the activities going on, what I'd like to do is be able to be a little bit more of a liaison between CLAC and Park Board than I have been. It's been very informal. I'd like to see about maybe getting some time on the agenda where I could, because the meetings are so close together, where I could, just from a Park Board perspective, member on the CLAC, report back on activities going on in CLAC. And then I'd like to do the same thing back to CLAC, so they better understand the bigger picture and the overall priorities of the department.
Great idea.
So that would be a request for a future item to be added to the agenda.
We can do that. At one time, we had a permanent agenda item for reports from our CLAC and other boards, so that would be wonderful. We should do the same with Danny on OSAC, because he is our liaison to both, so we can have reports from Park Board liaisons to CLAC and OSAC.
That's great.
That's great. Thanks.
Any other comments? Margie?
Nope.
No.
Thanks for all the information, everybody.
Be great to get a motion, please.
Margie's already unmuted.
Okay, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
Yes.
There's a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. It's always great seeing your faces.
Bye.